Hey y'all, welcome to the Coyote Trapping School podcast. As always, I'm your host, Chris Pope. Today, I got a few kind of housekeeping things to get to before we get into the meat and potatoes of this episode. I'm really excited about this episode. But to start with, I wanted to go through a few of the upcoming conventions that are going to be held around the South is what I focused on, and I'll try to kind of update these over the next few episodes because it's convention season and those things are coming up. So I've said it 1,000 times, but finding one of these conventions near you is a great way if you're interested, if you're new to trapping, to go and see some hands-on demonstrations and how people set traps and what people do with their traps. Also a great place to get your supplies, get stocked up for the coming season without having to pay for shipping. And some of the vendors there usually got some show specials, and you can kind of pick their brain a little bit about certain things, which is a huge plus in my opinion. Being able to get some one-on-one advice from somebody that sure enough knows what they're doing. So moving right into it, just kind of going to go through, like I said, kind of the southeast here. First off, the Alabama Trapper and Predator Control Association. Their fall meeting is going to be September 28th at Dora Farms, and I didn't write down where that is, but if you can go to atpca.org. Alabama Trapper and Predator Control Association, atpca.org. And most of these, if you Google whatever state you're interested in, Trappers Association, the link will pop up for the Trappers Association page. And then if it doesn't say on the home page when the convention is, look for an events tab, or either in Google look right under the first result, and a lot of times there'll be a calendar and events tab or something like that. Click on that events tab and that'll take you to what you're looking for, show you where the conventions are, the next few meetings that are coming up. So that's Alabama. Georgia Trappers Association, their 39th annual convention is going to be held September 20th and 21st at FDR State Park, which is in Pine Mountain, Georgia. They've had it there last year in the same area. Have it again this year. Good turnout. They've got a lot of good vendors. I said it before, unfortunately, I was planning on making it. I won't be able to make it to the GTA convention this year. I really hate that, but definitely keep that in mind and try to plan accordingly next time. Some states are better than others about kind of posting their upcoming convention dates ahead of time, and Georgia tends to be one that does do pretty good about putting that stuff out there with plenty of time to kind of give you a heads up. Florida Trappers Association, their 2019 rendezvous is going to be September 6th and 7th at CC&C Farms. That's in Jasper, Florida. Again, either on the State Trappers Association page or their Facebook. Some of them have Facebook pages. You can get more specifics about locations, time and dates, their vendor list, demo list, all that. Most of them should have that posted already, and you can go kind of find out some more information if you need to stay, where places to stay are. Most of the time when these conventions are held, the association will kind of partner with a hotel or a couple hotels and get some discounts through the hotels. So be sure to check that out if you're thinking about going and staying, traveling overnight. I couldn't find anything for South Carolina Trappers Association, so if there's any South Carolina trappers out there, shoot me a note, Chris at CoyoteTrappingSchool.com. Let me know if y'all have your your convention planned. I'm sure it's planned for this fall, but all there was the last year's convention information, so not sure about that one. Tennessee Fur Harvesters Association, October 4th through the 6th at Fall Creek Falls State Park in Spencer, Tennessee. North Carolina Trappers Association, September 27th and 28th, Smithfield Livestock Auction Arena in Smithfield, North Carolina. Again, Mississippi Trappers Association, I didn't find anything. I know last year their convention was held at Bass Pro in Jackson, I believe, Mississippi, and I think that was a pretty big hit from what I understand. So I'm not sure if they're going to do that again this year. Any Mississippi trappers out there that know, shoot me a note, PM me somewhere, DM me somewhere, let me know, and I'll get that out there so everybody can be planning on coming. And then lastly, the 2019 Southeastern Regional NTA National Trappers Association Convention. So I went to the national convention, the national convention, I guess you could say, in Springfield, Missouri, a couple weeks ago. And the National Trappers Association always has regional conventions also, because we're all as trappers so spread out across the nation, and so they usually have a northeastern, a southeastern, a northwestern, or a western, or something. Maybe it's just western. But anyway, the Southeastern Regional Convention is going to be held October 18th and 19th in Crossville, Tennessee, at the Cumberland County Community Complex. So, man, that's a good one too. A little bit bigger than most of the state associations, and honestly, from some of the folks that I've talked to at the national convention, talking with some of those guys that have attended more of the northern conventions, those it sounds like those are far and away more intensive and attended than the southern ones that I've been to. The southern ones, it's a pretty good turnout, and there's a good number of vendors, but it sounds like the farther north you go, Pennsylvania, maybe New York, Ohio, Minnesota, Michigan, some of those is some sure enough big turnouts, a lot of trappers, a lot of vendors and stuff like that. So if you're in northern states, I would definitely encourage you to go. It's piqued my interest in trying to make some of these northern conventions now. So I know the next nationals is in Kalamazoo, Michigan next spring or next summer, I guess. Hadn't really thought a whole lot about that one, but after talking to folks about how big those, especially once you get into Michigan and the UP, it's kind of got me itching to go and check it out. So we'll see if I make it that far. But anyway, be planning on attending a convention if you can, and supporting your local Trappers Association as well as the National Trappers Association. I get NTA alerts fairly regular about new bills and opposition things that come up trapping wise, and that's what they're out there on the front lines defending our freedoms and our rights to trap, and so we want to make sure we maintain that. And I'm not sure about the stats, but it's I don't know how the right terminology, but I don't think it's really comparable, the number of trappers versus the number of trappers that are part of the NTA or their state conventions or their state associations. It's a small percentage, and that those organizations are what is keeping the fight alive to make sure that we don't lose our rights. And these rights, I did a podcast earlier about a bunch of the opposition, the bills and stuff going around in the spring. It seems like that stuff a little bit kind of has died down from what it was, but it's still out there, and it's going to come up again and again. So supporting these organizations, Fur Takers of America, these organizations that are out there helping to protect our freedoms, we need to be doing it, because we're the first line of defense. Trappers are easy ones to pick on because everybody can justify shooting Bambi if they're going to eat it, but it's easy to throw up a old big bear trap and make the trapper the bad guy. So join your associations and support your trapping organizations. Okay, now to get into the meat of this discussion, I just finished reading Clint Locklear's Eastern Wolfer. I picked this up from Clint at the NTA convention, and I absolutely enjoyed it. I would strongly recommend, if you're a trapper, especially in the East, but anywhere, if you're a trapper and you're wanting to improve your coyote game, I think this is well worth it. I wore out a highlighter highlighting just points and takeaways. I mean, if you're watching this on video, I've got all kinds of stuff highlighted in here. Wished I'd have done that with Hoof Beats of a Wolfer. I'll go back and do that, but there's so much in here, and so I want to cover a few things. I'm not by any means going to give anything away. There's too much in here to cover in a short podcast, but I want you to support Clint and what he's doing, because he's put a lot of his knowledge and experience into this. So, but I want to give you an overview and encourage you to go buy this if you're interested in improving your coyote game. And that's kind of what he talks about right out of the gate. Is kind of the first thing that he talks about right out of the gate, and it's, if you're not willing or interested in changing the way you think about trapping, about coyote trapping, then you're better off not to read it, because a lot of the stuff he talks about is, and I don't want to say it's too much, but it's a lot of stuff. And I want you to support Clint and what he's doing, because he's put a lot of totally the opposite. And he says that in there. He said, I know this is different. Right in the introduction, page number 3, he said, I've titled this book Eastern Wolfer for a reason. Most coyote trappers in the East have been taught to think and trap a certain way. This Eastern coyote mindset is based off fox trapping, not coyote trapping. And he talks about how, a lot of the things that he talks about and the way he thinks is totally different from kind of the standard trapping mentality. And so you need to be willing to open your mind a little bit to read this. And I guess in saying all that, if you are on the fence about reading this book, you may want to wait till after my coming up trapping season, because I'm planning on doing a lot of things different from reading this. So hopefully my catch numbers reflect that. If they don't, then you might scrap it and keep on doing what you're doing. But the reason that I've kind of delved off into this book and O'Gorman's book, and I've just sent off for James Lucero's Master Wolfer book, is that another, let's see where Clint says it in here, that he talks about being an average coyote trapper. And that's how he started out. Kind of how he started out in trapping was he kind of gives a little bit of his history, but he was doing beaver control work to start with, and then some things changed, and so he shifted heavier into doing predator work, and that's how his whole predator control group came about. And he talks about exactly. I mean, I felt like he had been following me and looking over my shoulder the whole time, because over the last couple of years, I know I'm leaving coyotes on the ground, and I've just not been satisfied with my catches, and that's why I'm trying to do what I can to improve myself as a trapper. And so that this thing, it just hits so many points personally, just because I felt like he was talking right to me, so one of the things that he talks about is East versus West, because there are a lot of differences, and honestly, a lot of the big numbers folks and the big numbers guys, you see Milligan, his classic, the classic Milligan lures and stuff, and he's got that huge barn wall covered with hundreds of coyote pelts, and a lot of the numbers coyote guys are out west, or we think of them out west, and the numbers fox guys are in the east. And so that's one of the things that he hammers on early on, and he says specifically about east versus west. He says, Clint's in Tennessee, so he's an eastern guy, southeastern guy. He's trapped all over the country, but a lot in the southeast, more so than a lot of other people that put out content like he does. We have more people, crappy weather, short trap checks, equipment restrictions, short seasons, small tracts of ground, and did I say crappy weather? So he's acknowledging there's a lot of differences between east and west. And but he goes on to say, a coyote trapper has to learn to take more coyotes out of a population. Here's one of those things where it's counter to what you've been told, you've been taught. This is about impossible with the set 2 traps and run motto of the long line. And so that's a lot of what he does is kind of counters he talks about the commercial style trapping. Today's commercial style trapping, the eastern style trapping, is kind of derived from the long line, and a mix of fox long lining in the east and just in general predator coyote long lining in the west. And the short of it is that that mindset for the most part doesn't fit with the east, I guess. Like you said, you got got short, small tracts of ground, and if you followed me, or if you trapped anywhere in the east, that. For me, having a 500 acre tract of land is a big tract of land, and heaven forbid, there's probably going to be 5 gates on that 500 acres, so, and that's one of the, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, and it's tough to kind of stay focused, and I kind of try to progress through this book. But another one of the things that he talks about that I really appreciate is he says early on, he says trapping is a journey, not a destination, and that's where, you know, guys like Clint and some of the top performing guys out there, they're still out there trying to learn, trying to improve themselves. You got to know as a trapper, there's always going to be more to learn, because those coyotes, just when you think you got them figured out, or any fur bearer for that matter, you know, there's so many intricacies and so many things, and they learn new things, and we have to learn from them. So there's always something new out there. But one thing he talks about is trap numbers, and so reading straight from the book, the amount of traps that you set per farm for this system, which he's kind of talking about his system, is a lot more than most guys will agree to. And he talks about, you know, the typical kind of trapping mindset, especially with the set 2 traps and go on to the next spot. He talks about, you know, the saying, if it's good enough for 1, it's good enough for 2, and you know, how, you know, going on to 500 acres, 200 acres, whatever, you know, you may go on 200 acres, and if you're looking at the traditional location setup, well, there may only be 3 good locations on that 200 acres. So, you know, or 2. So you're talking about 4 to 6 traps covering that 200 acres or 500 acres or something like that. And his approach is the major locations, which is the traditional locations that, you know, we are used to setting up, the crossroads and fence crossings and gates and things like that. Things that, from any article, any of my videos that you've watched, any other videos, you know, when they're talking about location, it's going to be more so, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. You're setting more so on location a lot of times than sign, if that makes sense. You know, you can look at an aerial photo, Google Earth, and look at a farm that you've got permission to trap on, and you can kind of go ahead and pick out the spots. And now, you know, a lot of times you're going to go out there, and once you ride through, you're going to see some tracks in the sand and stuff. But again, one of the challenges of trapping in the east, especially in the southeast, where we don't have snow, is there may not be a lot of sign. There may not be a lot of tracks that are available, you know, there for you to view. So a lot of times you are trying to set up on location versus setting on sign. And let's see. Bear with me. I'm kind of, if you're listening on the podcast, I'm kind of flipping through to talking about travel ways. So when he gets to talking about major locations and minor locations, and the thing that he so getting to the more of the minor locations, one of the things he says, talking about either, I would rather sit on a track on a logging road than on a classic trapper location. And that's what I'm talking about. Is, you know, there's so many times that we focus on finding the right location, the best location, the classic location, if you will, of the logging roads intersection. And, you know, we talk about, I've said it myself 1,000 times, how, you know, a coyote's lazy and he's going to take the path of least resistance to get to where he's going. But if you think about, what if he's not going through that intersection? What if he's going to his hunting spot, and his hunting spot is 100 yards before he gets to that intersection, he digs off? Or what if he crosses a rabbit trail, or a rabbit shoots out in front of him or something like that, and he bears off into the woods after the rabbit and never makes it to that location? And so there again, the setting setting 2 traps on a location and going to the next location, that the if it's good enough for 1, it's good enough for 2. He's making me rethink that seriously. And here's one of the things that really hits home. He's talking about that. And how many times have you picked a location, put in a couple of traps, only to have one set catch something and the other catch nothing? Tons of times. And I got thinking about that. You know, in my trapping career, off the top of my head, and I don't profess to be the best coyote trapper out there, but I can think of 3 times when I've had coyote doubles. Now, I've had other times when I've caught, a cat and a fox, or a pair of foxes, or a coon and a cat, or something like that. I've caught doubles, but in the last 15 years of trapping, and I may be missing something, but there's been 3 times that I can think of that I've caught true doubles on coyotes. 4 actually. I guess 5, because I had one of the locations in Arkansas. I caught 2 doubles there. Anyway, a handful of times, much less than once a year, right? And so this is what really got me. That is because the set that made catches was the right set on the right location. More often than not, the set that does not catch was forced to meet the set 2 traps per location idea. that punched me in the gut. That's what got me to thinking about, how many times have I truly gotten doubles? It's not that many, and there is very much, a lot of times I'll pull up to a location and bam, I know the first spot, and then I gotta kind of think and look around and really hem and haw, and it kind of just like what he says, force the second set. And he goes on, by setting a single trap on more minor and major locations, it allows me to cover every travel way, hit them where they are, not where you want them to be. And so going from looking for more of the minor locations and setting, so obviously you're not going to pass the classic crossroads location, especially if there's sign there, but maybe there's a trail 100 yards one way or the other that just as easily could be run by coyotes too, right? And so maybe I set one at the classic location and one at the trail. And that's, he talks about that, of letting the sign dictate the number of sets. If you come to a 5-way logging road intersection and there's scat and kickbacks and tracks everywhere, you dang right, put in, 2, 3, 4, 5 sets, however many you feel like needs. But if you roll up to a classic intersection and there's one good spot, don't force the other one. And I'm telling you all this from reading the book, not from putting this stuff into practice. And that's why I am super excited to put some of this stuff into practice this coming trapping season, and see what it's about. See if it's really, it makes sense in my mind. And so I don't want to just go off whole hog, and I try not to kind of jump on a fanboy of just going crazy about something, but all this stuff makes sense, and that's why I'm excited about putting it into use this trapping season. So if you're not totally sold, give me 5 months and let's get into trapping season, and let's see if some of this stuff's paying off. I think it will. I don't think it's gonna hurt. I don't think it's gonna hurt anything. Let's see, what else did I want to get to? He talks about scent control, and he is. There's 2 camps. There's one camp that's, you got to be careful and gloves with everything, and there's another camp of, well, I can smoke my cigarette and set my trap barehanded and rock and roll with it. Clint tends to fall more in the barehanded, scent doesn't matter. And I actually had somebody suggest, and I haven't done it yet. I haven't found anybody yet, but to get a like a canine handler, dog handler, or something like that on the podcast to talk specifically about, how dogs smell. Because the reality is, those coyotes know that we've been there. They know that, we knelt down there. Don't matter how many rubber gloves and kneeling pads we got, and they know that there's something in that dirt, maybe. They could smell it if they wanted to, but there's rusted metal and all kinds of stuff in the dirt anywhere in the southeast. So that's not necessarily unnatural. And hopefully, if you're using good baits and lures, or whatever you're using as a attractant, is more interesting than obviously what's in the ground, your trap. One of the things he says, I've never is in all caps, met a numbers coyote man that pulled and cleaned traps after a catch. And I'll get people ask me questions about pulling and he says, even I see no reason to pull traps after a catch, even if you are taking the traps to a new location. So meaning there that you make a catch and you're moving to another farm, I'd say 95% of the coyote trappers in the East are going to throw that trap in a pile to be washed and retreated before they go set it again, myself included. He's saying, take it, set it on the next farm, and just roll with it. And there are a lot of things that seem to be taken for gospel in the, probably in any industry, but in the trapping industry, from folks that operate on a small scale. It's totally different from folks that operate on a large scale. Like, you know, I was talking with Charlie Mashik, and he was talking about wood versus wire, and you know, that was one of the things he said is, you know, yeah, wood looks prettier. You know, you get a nice, a better put up, but anybody that's in production fur handling, that's handling a lot of hides at a time, they don't have the time to mess with every nail in wood. They're going to put it on wire, get it hung, and go on about their business. And, you know, Clint talking the same thing. I mean, you talk about some of these Western guys especially that are running coyote traps 365 days a year. They don't have time to go and retreat their traps every time. I say that. I'm not one of them. I've never talked to, you know, I've never specifically asked them about that, but it makes sense that it makes sense, and that they would, you know, they're going to keep their stuff out to keep their traps in use to keep their catches up. It says having a rusty trap on a great location will outperform a so-so location with a real clean trap any day. So, kind of the mindset of a set trap is better than one sitting at the house is that makes sense. And I think Clint he learned from O'Gorman, and you can kind of tell in some of his methods are similar to in reading Hoofbeats of a Wolfer. I don't know where I was going. I guess, you know, some folks, it's easy for people to criticize because somebody's better, and I can be put in that same camp of trying to poke holes in reasoning or poke holes in something, you know, when they can do it better than me, you know, and I don't really know where I'm going with that, other than a lot of this stuff is different. And I definitely would encourage you to keep an open mind about it, because I think that the stuff, I think that this is going to work. I think it's going to change. I think it's going to help. All right, that may be the best way to put it. I think it's going to help improve my catches. Just thinking differently. Another thing that I really thought was key, and talking about, you know, scent control and things like that, is fox and coon dig up traps. Typically, coyotes don't dig up traps. Sometimes they may roll. Excuse me. They may roll in the area and fire a trap, but typically coyotes aren't digging up traps. Talking about, you know, the excuse, and in my, speaking personally from my experience, you know, that can be an easy dug up trap, can be an easy scapegoat for a dirty trap. I would say 99% of the time that's an improperly bedded trap, and whatever animal it was stepped on that trap and the trap shifted, and that's what caused the digging. Not to get and there's so much more to this. Clint talks about how he likes to prepare his traps, you know, the kind of the sets that he, the way he does it, and there's pictures in here. The one thing, if I had to make a request, it's not overly pictured up to make the book longer, which I appreciate that. You know, there was a lot of catch pictures in O'Gorman's Hoofbeats of a Wolfer, and they were all black and white. They were all older pictures, which all of these are black and white too. But to me, that didn't add a whole lot. And there's some catch pictures in here just to back up what he's saying. But the one thing that I wish is there's some set pictures too. And I wish the set pictures had highlighted where the trap actually was, and we'll get into that. We'll get into that now. But one of the major things, the major takeaways for me that he talked about is you've got to keep your traps working. So what's the biggest thing that we deal with in the East, that in the Southeast and the North? But I'm thinking Southeast minded selfishly, and I apologize for you guys that are in the North. But the biggest thing is battling the weather and keeping your traps working through the weather, whether that's rain, whether that's freezing, whatever it is, making sure that you're keeping your traps working. And I talked a little bit, it's been about a year or so ago with Mark Zager, and that's kind of what he alluded to, and I think that's what the same thing that Clint's, these guys have got a system. They've got a trapping system, and the core of that system is keeping those traps working when they got them set. And one thing that I really liked, and this punched me right in the gut, because I've said this in some of the videos that you've watched if you follow me very long. And this comes straight from the book. Don't fall for the myth of having a low spot over your pan. A coyote doesn't care about the little drop in the pattern over your pan. And he goes on to talk about, just think about it for a moment. How do we build a pond? Now, where does the water stand during a rainfall? In the low spot, where your trap is. And how many times have we seen that, where you go out checking your line, and your dish that you set, because that's how I set a lot of my traps, is slightly lower than ground level. Your dish is floating, and that's one of the reasons that I like the pipe dream set and Zager set, is using the grass clippings can keep it working through the rain. And that's everybody this past, so the trapping season of 2018-2019 was wet all across the U.S., I guess, especially in the South. And being able to keep your sets working during those wet times, which you're going to get rain once or twice a week a lot of times through the winter. So if your traps aren't working after a rain, then one, coyotes work on. You see more activity before and especially after a front moves through. And so if your traps aren't working during those times, then you're out of luck. And so one of the things, let's see, where is it at? And he talks about how you can pick your locations and try to make sure where you sit is rainproof, so to speak. And he talks about one of the things that, let's see, where was this at? Most dirt holes are nothing but a rain catcher on flat ground. If you sit on Monday and get 2 inches of rain that night, it takes 3 days to drain, especially if you're in red clay like me. You have missed 4 out of 7 days of trapping. The percentage that a dirt hole is out of commission during the season could reach 50%. Not very productive. Bam! I mean, that's huge. If you're in the set to and go mentality, and one of your 2 sets is always a dirt hole, and your dirt hole is out of commission 50% of the time, that means a quarter of the year, if I'm thinking about that right, a quarter of the season, or out of the full season, a quarter of your sets are out of commission. That's not very good for maintaining catches and getting your catch numbers up. And so setting to keep your traps in working order all the time is huge, obviously. And thinking differently about a dirt hole, and let's see. There's another quote in here about let's see. Another quote that comes from Bear with me. I got so many highlights. It's hard to see where I'm going or what I'm after. It's talking about a quote from old wolfers, old school trappers that talk about that holes are for foxes, flat sets are for coyotes, and it says several times in here, kind of quoting old school trappers. Holes are for foxes. Holes are for cats and foxes, or holes are for foxes. And he talks about that, the mentality, and most of the guys in the East, 40 years ago there were no coyotes in the East, so everybody was fox trappers. So lo and behold, as the years progress, foxes start showing up. Excuse me, I got I'm still hog trapping. And if you couldn't hear, that was my phone going off. I'm still hog trapping, and last night I had the hogs in the trap, but my notification didn't go off. For some reason, every once in a while it'll get to where it'll load them all up, and so it won't go off. It's supposed to go off every time it takes a picture, and it sends a picture in. For whatever reason, sometimes I don't know if it's my signal, but it won't go off until it'll go off at one time, but then it's catching up for the past hour or more that it hasn't gone off. And so I got that this morning at 5 o'clock. My phone went off with like 30 notifications. I had pigs in the trap, but I had them at 4:30 when I had them all in the trap. There was only 2 still in the trap at 5 when I heard it all. And so I missed my opportunity. So I'm staying definitely tuned in to try to make sure that I don't miss pigs. So back to coyote trapping from hog trapping. Talking about the as coyotes started to move in, a lot of folks just approached coyotes as, well, coyotes is a bigger fox, so just back off, a few more inches because he's a little bit taller, he's got a little bit longer legs, and you'll pick up coyotes, and you will do that. But the government trappers and the guys out west that have been chasing coyotes the whole time, they've got a different take on it and a different outlook than the eastern fox trappers. And so a lot of, in Clint's opinion anyway, a lot of the eastern trapping methods are more derived from eastern fox trappers than they are from true coyote trappers, or true coyote trapping methods. And that's where kind of the difference is. And it, again, that makes a lot of sense, because there's, the government has put a lot of money, and there's been a lot of men over the last 130 years that have trapped out west, done everything they could to kill coyotes. And, they ain't been worried about foxes. They'll catch foxes, but they've been targeting coyotes, and, a coyote is a different animal than a fox. So, moving right along. Let's see. Is there anything else that I want? The key to it all is making sure you're keeping your traps working as much as possible. And one of the things, and it's something that is probably not, I guess maybe not explained very well. It was kind of a misconception, I guess you could say, on my point. One of the big things that he hits on and talks about is blind sets, and how that is a huge coyote getter, blind sets. But I've never, and I've probably kind of used this as a crutch. For one, in the East, if you find a trail, everything's using that trail, and it can be hard to narrow that down. Like I say, this is a crutch probably approach, but it can be hard to narrow that down to, well, I'm gonna set a coyote trap on this trail. And then when I've always thought about blind sets, it's been, no lure, no bait, no nothing. You just setting the trap, and maybe putting a stick guide or a log guide here, and trying to and I've set a few like on cow paths and stuff when cows weren't in the field, but he talks about using blind sets, but then using bait and lure around, and maybe not specifically, right on beside your trap, because you don't want to draw added attention to your trap. But if you've got a good trail that you think or coyotes are using, setting a trail set, a blind set, blending it in, and then scattering some bait and lure, or putting things around where you're not drawing attention specifically to the trap, but it's still an attraction that may cause the coyote to slow down as he's coming through. So that was really interesting and intriguing. And there again, you're not relying on a hole that's a rain catcher. So there's a lot to chew on in here. In talking about dirt holes, let's see. One of the things that he mentions the Teachers of the Night videos. And if you're unfamiliar, Clint Locklear, the Predator Control Group, I guess, is there who produced them, but they did a series of videos called Teachers of the Night, and it's all night vision recordings of critters working sets. And it's really, I have to go back and look, because I've watched the coon ones, and I'm not sure I've watched the coyote ones or not. If I haven't, I may have to order one. I got the coon night Teachers of the Night. If I hadn't bought the coyote one, I may have to and go back and look at it, just because it's kind of, what better way to learn from a critter than watching a critter, doing his thing without and I try to do that with my trail cameras, but these videos are set up where they can record longer segments, and you're not limited to a 30-second or a minute clip. So one thing that I really took note of was, he said the highest percentage, this is from the Teachers of the Night videos, the highest percentage of coyotes work the sets from a 45-degree angle back from the hole. And we also learned another fact that needs to be used on the woofer line. Any elevation behind the hole becomes the new kill area. The coyotes would head to the higher ground over 80% of the time. And that's one of the things that I wished it showed better in the pictures. Is, he'll show the pictures and he'll show the hole and you can see the pattern, but I don't know whether the trap is in the pattern or whether the trap's behind the hole. Blended in, obviously, and he goes through backing and all that stuff too. But man, that really jumped out to me. Is this is not kind of guessing of experience. This is watching hours of video footage and how coyotes reacted, and you're talking about hole angle and stuff like that. One of the things that is kind of parallels hoofbeats of a woofer, talks about deep holes, and making sure you're not putting a 8 or 10 or 12 inch hole in. You're putting a deep hole in. Don't make your sets into some easy to use social program like welfare. And I've had that happen plenty, even on this past year's trap line. Something comes by, whether it's a coyote, fox, whatever, and my excuse being that we have hard red clay, and so I don't do a good job of getting my hole deep enough. Boom, critter pulls out my bait, and why does he need to come back and visit now? Unless he liked the bait and wants it again, and I can sucker him in doing that. But I missed him the first go around, and that's not what I want to be doing. One thing in wrapping up, he talked about baits and lures, and talked about natural baits, and that's one thing. If you listen to the episode with Steve Wright, we talked about natural baits, and Steve talked about using natural baits, and that's definitely something I want to mess with and play with a little more this season, because one of the things that you may notice, you can notice on your trap line sometimes, and Clint talks about it in here from the studies of showing that adult coyotes are very cautious about new things in their area. And so they may, they see a fresh dirt hole, the adults might breeze by scared to approach it, but the pups may run up and approach it, and so you may be catching more pups that the dirt holes are producing, but they're producing the pups, not the adults. And the one thing that is hammered in here is, we're already trapping on small tracts of land, opening gates and jumping properties, and maybe not side by side properties. So it's imperative that you're taking as many coyotes off of that property as you can. All the coyotes that are there, you want to get them out of there. Let's see, there's one, and so play into that. Play into the, a new bait down a hole with all the different smells that it may have, the gland lures mixed in, whatever. And I'm using this loosely as me thinking about it, not actual research or anything, but I could see where that would cause a coyote hesitation versus, some fresh whatever down the hole, deer meat, liver, whatever down the hole that a coyote's used to smelling. Of course, you do have the you do. I mean, if you're in the South, you got to be cautious about buzzards, vultures for sure. Let's see. There's one thing another line I was gonna read. Honestly, I can't remember now what it was. Anyway. And also, the one thing that he talks about is using bait, using natural bait, and maybe it's not down a dirt hole. Maybe it's kind of tucked in a grass clump, or kind of semi-used with a flat set. But instead of using something like say a skull or something that's boom right out there in the middle of an intersection, like what we would think about and what I've done before, instead of doing that, put it off to the side, put it off to the edge, close to the travel way, and scratch some dirt over it. That looks a lot more natural, like, maybe another coyote came out and buried it there, than, the skull or the head or something like that just sitting there. Using baits and lures, or baits more specifically, not necessarily down a dirt hole, but covering it, not just throwing them around on top of the ground, but kind of covering them up, making them look kind of natural, like something maybe buried it there that could improve or lessen the timidity of a adult coyote, I guess you could say, is a good way. I feel like I'm not really getting that across very good, but anyway. Another thing in wrapping up, another thing that he talks about is I guess in general, he's not a big fan of the cookie cutter. This is a dirt hole set to catch a coyote, and I'm getting at now the trap placement. He says it's all about the angle of approach. You got to think about the angle of approach. How often, as I always, 99% of the time, I center my trap off from my dirt hole or whatever it is. How often is a coyote going to be running down the road, stop dead perpendicular, I guess you would say, dead even with your trap, and approach it right from that 90 degrees, and where he's going to go right over your set? That ain't happening very often. Either he's smelling your set before or after he's passed it, and so he's coming in at an angle. That was another kind of takeaway that just kind of I filed back in my mind, is we want a cookie cutter approach of do this every time and it'll produce results. And the way we're doing it will make catches, but I don't want to be an average coyote catcher. I want to one day have one of those Milligan or O'Gorman walls of 100 coyotes tacked up there, And so that's what I'm trying to set myself apart from being average. And the stuff that I've been doing is not getting me where I want to go. So in my mind, anyway, I've got to do something outside of the box. I've got to change something somewhere to improve my results. So hopefully, from from these, reading these books, and I really appreciate a different perspective. That's really what this is, a 92-page book. Not full. I mean, it's a lot of writing. It's not a lot of pictures, which I like that. I mean, that's what I didn't buy it to see catch pictures. I bought it to learn from it, and that's what it is. So, if you're interested in thinking outside of the box, interested in hopefully improving as a trapper, and breaking away from being average, I'd encourage you to purchase Eastern Wolfer. I bought it from Clint for $27. I don't know what he sells it for on his website. I'm sure it's available from all the trapping supply dealers. Wherever you can find it, I would say it's worth reading. And if you got hesitations about spending the money, wait till this trapping season, and let's see if I can increase my catches, and maybe that'll be enough to push you over the edge to buy the book. But I hope that's valuable. I hope that's useful. Just going through some of these things, like I said, that's what I'm looking at. I'm trying to think about how I can be better than average, because I feel like now I am at to below average as a coyote trapper, and I'm not satisfied with that. So I really appreciate the different perspective, thinking a little bit differently about it from what we, the classical, what we've always been taught, because that hasn't been cutting it for me. So, man, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. If you agree, disagree, if you've read the book, put this stuff into practice, and it has helped. If you've got any other book recommendations, so I just sent, I think I said it earlier, but I just sent a check off to get James Lacero's Master Wolfer. I'm excited. I've heard a lot of good things about that. So hopefully we'll do the same kind of overview of that once I get it in, and I appreciate these guys, being willing to put this information out there for us as trappers to help better ourselves. The trapping industry, in my opinion, has come a long way from the the trappers of the heyday of the fur boom in the 70s and 80s and before. They kind of treated trapping real close to the vest, and they didn't want to teach you how to be a trapper because that was going to cut into their profits, so to speak. But the trappers nowadays are a lot more open with helping you get started, helping you get in, and even if it costs a little bit, man, it costs Clint a lot more than $27 to get this experience. So, man, I gladly drop that for a shortcut. So, I hope my audio has not gone out, because I see my battery is dying on my microphone. But anyway, y'all have a good one, and we'll catch you next time.